It was a show about war that wasn't really about war. It was about what people do to stay human when everything around them is trying to make them otherwise. MASH premiered on CBS in September 1972, ran for 11 seasons, and ended on February 28, 1983, with a 2.5-hour finale that 105.9 million Americans watched, the largest audience for a single television episode in the history of the medium, a record that still stands today. The Korean War it depicted lasted 2.5 years. The show lasted 11. And in the 54 years since it all began, the people who brought the 4077th to life have dealt with burnout, illness, activism, loss, and the specific weight of belonging to something that meant more to more people than any of them ever fully anticipated. The last woman who appeared in both the pilot and the finale died in May 2025. The man who played Hawkeye Pierce turned 90 this year and is managing Parkinson's disease one exercise at a time. Here's the real story of the MASH cast. Number 1. Jamie Farr as Corporal Maxwell Q. Klinger, the cross-dresser who became an icon. He was only supposed to be there for one episode. Jamie Farr was hired for a single appearance as Corporal Klinger, a Lebanese-American soldier from Toledo, Ohio, who spent the entire show wearing Wiseman's clothing in an attempt to convince his superiors he was crazy enough to deserve a discharge. The joke caught on, the character caught on, and what was meant to be a one-day job became 11 seasons and one of the most beloved running gags in the history of American television. But here's where it gets really interesting, because the cross-dressing was never the heart of the character. What made Klinger work was that underneath the dresses and the hats and the elaborate schemes, he was the most ordinary, most human person in the camp. A working-class kid from Toledo who just wanted to go home. And audiences recognized that. They loved him for it. Jamie Farr played him with a warmth and a comedic timing that turned a one-joke premise into something far more durable. But there is more, because Jamie Farr's life after MASH was defined by two things above all others: loyalty and constancy. He appeared in all 3 Cannonball Run films. He appeared in After MASH alongside Harry Morgan and William Christopher. He became a regular presence on game shows. And he stayed, by every account, exactly the same person he had been before the fame. He has been married to Joy Ann Richards since 1963. They have 2 children and a grandson. When Loretta Swit died in May 2025, Farr released a statement that simply, "She was my adopted sister. As close as family can get. I can't begin to express how much she will be missed." In 2026, Jamie Farr is 91 years old. He is one of only 4 surviving main cast members of MASH. Klinger spent 11 seasons trying to escape the army by being something other than himself. Jamie Farr spent 60 years being exactly himself, and it turned out that was more than enough. But while Jamie Farr's story is one of warmth and constancy, the man who played the most beloved supporting character in the show's history left under very different circumstances. Because Gary Burghoff didn't get fired, wasn't written out, and wasn't replaced. He simply told the producers he needed to leave. And then he did. Number 2. Gary Burghoff as Corporal Walter Radar O'Reilly, the one who said enough. He was the heart of the camp. Radar O'Reilly, the soft-spoken, stuffed animal-clutching, company clerk who knew what was going to happen before it happened, who kept the chaos of the 4077th running through sheer quiet competence, was played by Gary Burghoff for 8 seasons. He was the only actor from Robert Altman's original 1970 MASH film to reprise his role in the television series. He received 7 Emmy nominations for the role. He won 1. But you know what's even crazier? Gary Burghoff was born with Poland syndrome, a rare birth defect that caused developmental abnormalities on the right side of his body, including his right hand. He spent his entire career carefully concealing from the camera, holding clipboards, keeping his right side turned away, arranging shots to avoid the issue. Almost nobody in the audience noticed. Almost nobody on the crew knew the full extent of it. More than 90% of the people watching this video right now are not subscribed. These are the people who gave 11 years of their lives to one of the greatest shows ever made. And most of their real stories have never been told. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this with one person. Now let's continue. But suddenly something happened. Because in 1979, after 8 seasons, Gary Burghoff told the producers he was leaving. He was burned out. He wanted to spend time with his family. He had given everything he had to Radar, and there was nothing left. His final episode, titled Goodbye, Radar, is considered one of the finest in the series. When Radar climbs into the helicopter and the camp watches him go, it is not entirely acting. The emotion in that scene is real. In 2026, Gary Burghoff is 82 years old. He lives quietly, paints wildlife art, a passion that has become a second career, and gives occasional interviews. He is one of 4 surviving main cast members. He and Loretta Swit exchanged tributes on Instagram in the weeks before her death. Radar O'Reilly was the person who held everything together while nobody was looking. Gary Burghoff turned out to be exactly that. A man who gave everything to his work, knew when he had given enough, and walked away with his dignity intact. But Gary Burghoff's quiet exit is one kind of MASH story. The man who replaced Wayne Rogers in Season 4 and became BJ. Hunnicutt built something entirely different after the cameras stopped. Because Mike Farrell spent the years after MASH doing the kind of work that most people in Hollywood talk about, and very few actually do. Number 3, Mike Farrell as Captain BJ Hunnicutt, the one who used his platform. He joined MASH in Season 4 as a replacement for Wayne Rogers, who had left abruptly after disputes with the producers. It was an almost impossible situation, taking over a beloved role, joining an established cast, being measured against a character the audience already loved. Mike Farrell handled it with such skill and warmth that within a season BJ Hunnicutt felt as essential to the show as anyone who had been there from the beginning. He was funny, he was humane, and he brought a specific kind of moral seriousness to the role that deepened what MASH was trying to do. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because Mike Farrell has spent the 50 years since MASH as one of the most committed political and humanitarian activists in Hollywood. Death penalty abolition, human rights advocacy. He has testified before Congress. He has visited death row prisoners. He has organized and spoken and written and refused to be quiet about the things he believes in. Not in the ways that celebrities sometimes attach themselves to causes as branding, but in the sustained, unglamorous way that actually changes things. He has been married to actress Shelley Fabares since 1984. He turned 86 in 2025. He was among the first to pay tribute to Loretta Swit after her death, posting a black-and-white photo of her with the caption, "Loretta, 1937 to 2025. In 2026, Mike Farrell remains one of only 4 surviving main cast members of MASH. He and Alan Alda have remained close friends for over 50 years. BJ Hunnicutt was the one who kept his moral compass pointing north, even when the war was doing its best to knock it sideways. Mike Farrell turned out to be exactly that, a man who chose every year to keep pointing north. But the most remarkable transformation in the MASH cast belongs to the woman who played Hot Lips Houlihan, because Loretta Swit didn't just play that character. She fought, season by season, to change who that character was allowed to be. Number 4, Loretta Swit as Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan, the woman who rewrote her own character. She inherited the role from Sally Kellerman, who had played Margaret Houlihan in the original 1970 film. When Loretta Swit joined MASH for the television series, the character was defined almost entirely by her nickname, Hot Lips, and by the affair she was having with the odious Frank Burns. She was a punchline, a foil, a one-joke stereotype of the uptight military woman who existed mainly for the male characters to react against. But you know what's even crazier? Loretta Swit spent years lobbying the writing staff to change that. She pushed, season by season, for scripts that gave Margaret more complexity, more dignity, more of an interior life. She worked with the writers to develop storylines that showed Houlihan's vulnerabilities, her intelligence, her genuine competence as a nurse and an officer. And it worked. By the later seasons, Margaret Houlihan was one of the most fully realized female characters on American primetime television. Alan Alda later wrote, "She worked hard in showing the writing staff how they could turn the character from a one-joke sexist stereotype into a real person, with real feelings and ambitions. We celebrated the day the script came out listing her character not as Hot Lips, but as Margaret. But suddenly, something happened, because on May 30, 2025, Loretta Swit died at her home in New York City. She was 87 years old. Her final Instagram posts, in the days before her death, were tributes to Gary Burghoff's birthday and a Memorial Day post honoring fallen soldiers. Her last public words entirely in keeping with the woman she had been. She had appeared at the 50th anniversary reunion special in 2024, looking sharp and warm and exactly herself. She was one of only 2 actors, the other being Alan Alda, to appear in both the pilot episode and the final episode of MASH. She won 2 Emmys. She was nominated 10 times. Jamie Farr said, "She was my adopted sister, as close as family can get." Margaret Houlihan became a real person because Loretta Swit refused to let her be anything less. It is perhaps the most lasting contribution anyone made to that show, and one of the most quietly revolutionary acts in the history of American television. But the last person standing from both the first episode and the last is also the man who defined what MASH was and what it could be. And at 90 years old, he is managing a Parkinson's diagnosis with the same wit and determination that Hawkeye Pierce would have brought to a field hospital in Korea. Number 5. Alan Alda as Captain Benjamin Hawkeye Pierce, the last man standing. There has never been a character quite like Hawkeye Pierce, and there has never been a performer quite like Alan Alda. The wisecracking, deeply moral, perpetually exhausted surgeon who used humor as armor and compassion as medicine was not just the center of MASH, he was its conscience. Alda played him for all 11 seasons, wrote many of the episodes, and directed several of the most celebrated installments in the series. He was the only male cast member to appear in both the very first episode and the legendary finale. But here's where it gets really interesting, because Alan Alda's career after MASH reads like a second lifetime. Woody Allen Films, The West Wing, where he played Senator Arnold Vinnick with such force and intelligence that audiences wanted his character to win the fictional presidency. Bridge of Spies, Marriage Story, SAG Lifetime Achievement Award. And all the while, behind the scenes, Alda was building something else. A dedication to science communication that led to a podcast, Clear Plus Vivid, focused on the art of human connection, and decades of work as host of Scientific American Frontiers. But suddenly something happened, because in 2018, Alan Alda disclosed that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease 3 years earlier, in 2015. He had kept it private. He went public, he said, because he had noticed his thumb trembling during an interview and wanted to control the story himself, rather than have it discovered and reported without context. I've had a full life since the diagnosis, he said. I've acted, I've given talks, I've done a podcast, I've traveled. By 2025, he told people that managing the disease had gone from a part-time job to almost a full-time job. But he kept finding the humor. It's a little like a game, he said. Almost every day I'm finding a new way to do something. On January 28, 2026, Alan Alda turned 90 years old. Mike Farrell posted a photograph of the two of them drinking red wine and smiling, captioned simply, "Happy birthday, my dear friend." Alda's grandson posted a photo of him eating thick pancakes coated with syrup and powdered sugar, and called him his biggest role model. Hawkeye Pierce used laughter to survive the unsurvivable. Alan Alda at 90 is still doing exactly that. Finding the funny side of something very hard, still making the most of his time here. Still, as Loretta Swit once said of herself, making the most of the time he has. MASH was a show about surviving something that shouldn't be survivable, and finding, in the people around you, the reasons to keep going. It ran for 11 years. It ended with 105.9 million people watching. And in the 54 years since it began, the people who made it have survived their own versions of the same challenge. Illness, loss, burnout, the long, complicated aftermath of belonging to something that outlasted them all. 4 of them are still here. The rest are gone. And the show they made together, about a war nobody wanted, in a format nobody expected, with humor that should not have worked and somehow worked better than almost anything else in television history, is still being watched, still being discovered, still making people feel less alone in the middle of something that shouldn't be survived. There is only one original MASH, and now you know what it really cost the people who made it.